Rao had trained most of his life to stay calm under pressure, but even he felt a strange weight on his chest when he stepped into the launch hall on the day of his departure. The mission he had accepted was unlike any he had taken before. This time he was not visiting a neighbor colony or a friendly world. He was traveling to the heart of the Galaxy Council, a place where laws were made for hundreds of species, and a place where humans had never been fully trusted. Still, he told himself that fear would not help him now. He had been chosen because he could listen, speak clearly, and handle conflict without losing control. He had settled border disputes, ended trade wars, and even convinced two species with ancient grudges to stop fighting. To the people of Earth, he was known as a steady voice, a calm mind, someone who could walk into a storm and come out with peace in his hands. He hoped this mission would be the same, though something deep inside told him this time might be different. The reason behind the Council's sudden demand for an envoy still felt unclear. Officially, they said Earth had expanded too fast. New colonies, new research stations, new mining outposts on worlds with resources other species also wanted. The Council claimed humans were upsetting the balance of the galaxy, but Rao knew how fast rumors could twist facts. Humans had worked hard to avoid conflict, even pulling back from systems when things grew tense. Yet the Council still summoned them, the shuttle prepared for launch. As Rao walked slowly across the platform, he glanced at the large view window, showing the sky shifting from bright morning to deep blue. Above that, his ship waited in orbit. The vessel was sleek, silver, and shaped like a long arrow. Earth had named it the Peace Messenger to make sure the Council understood their intentions. Several officers saluted him as he passed. He nodded to each of them, knowing many had stayed awake through the night to make sure every part of the mission was perfect. This was not only about him. His presence represented the entire human race. One officer, older and with a calm face, walked with him for a moment and spoke in a low voice. He explained once again that the Council was divided. Some species believed humanity could be trusted, but others saw humans as newcomers who climbed too fast. Rao had heard this many times already. He did not need more warnings, but he appreciated the honesty. He boarded the shuttle and sat near the window. As the engines hummed to life, he watched the platform shrink below him. The shuttle lifted smoothly, passing clouds, rising higher and higher until it broke into the silent darkness of space. From here, the world looked peaceful. Cities glowed faintly. Oceans shimmered like dark mirrors. Rao had seen this view many times, but this time it felt heavier, as if the entire planet was placing its hope on his shoulders. The Peace Messenger docked with the shuttle, and a small crew greeted him. They kept their voices professional, but he could see the same worry in their eyes. They all knew how important this mission was. A peaceful outcome could open the door to a stronger place in the galaxy. A failure could lead to fear, sanctions, or far worse. The journey to the Council world took several days. During that time, Rao reviewed past Council cases, communication logs from border disputes, and recent data on the political tension spreading across the galaxy. His goal was to understand the hidden stories behind the Council's summons. Often, the truth was buried deeper than the official reports. At night, when lights dimmed and the halls grew quiet, he would stand alone at the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly before him. Some were tiny dots. Others blazed like nearby fires. He wondered how many of those. Stars were homes to species who feared humans simply because they were new to the galactic stage. He also wondered whether fear alone could make someone call for war. Finally, the ship entered Council space. Rao sat upright as the vessel slowed, approaching a world unlike any other he had seen. The planet was covered in shimmering lights, golden rings, and towering structures that wrapped around the equator like a spiked crown. Ships of every shape and size flew between docking stations. Some looked like clusters of crystal. Others resembled folded metal wings. There were ships made of stone, ships that glowed, and ships that pulsed like living creatures. The Council's orbital guards scanned their ship thoroughly. The process took far longer than usual, and the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Humans had visited Council space before, but not often, and never for a case this serious. The peace messenger finally received permission to land. Rao stepped onto the landing platform, feeling the air shift slightly around him. It was warm, carrying a faint metallic smell. A group of Council attendants, all from different species, greeted him with polite gestures. None offered a smile. Some avoided eye contact entirely. A tall official with long silver limbs took the lead. He announced that Rao would be taken directly to the Council Dome for the opening hearing. No time to rest. No time to prepare inside a private chamber. Rao knew this meant they wanted to control the pace of the meeting, leaving him little room to think. As they walked through the vast corridors of the Council world, Rao observed the architecture carefully. The halls were wide, with patterns etched across the walls, each symbol representing a species that held a seat in the Council. Humans were not on the wall. Not yet. They had been granted observer status, but were still considered newcomers. The transport pod that carried them deeper into the complex moved silently. Rao remained calm and kept his expression neutral. He knew he was being watched closely. The Council would judge everything, even his breathing pattern. The pod arrived at a massive door shaped like a rising sun. Behind it lay the Council Dome, the center of galactic law. Rao walked inside and instantly felt hundreds of eyes on him. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in tiered rows, their bodies unique and varied. Some were tall and thin, some small and round. Others had wings or shifting skin or strange glowing auras. All had gathered to pass judgment on Earth. At the center of the dome, a circular platform rose from the floor. Rao stepped onto it, knowing this would be his place throughout the hearing. The platform made him visible from every angle. There was no hiding, no corner to retreat to, no place to soften the attention. A soft hum filled the dome as the Council's presiding voice spoke. It was a sound layered with many tones, as if several beings spoke at once. The voice welcomed him in a polite manner, but without warmth. It announced that Earth stood accused of disrupting galactic order through rapid expansion, unapproved mining operations, and unauthorized defense installations. Rao listened calmly. He had expected accusations, though not so many at once. When the presiding voice invited him to respond, he stepped forward and spoke with steady confidence. He explained that Earth had followed every published guideline, and that humans had even withdrawn from disputed zones to avoid conflict. He reminded the Council that many reports against Earth came from sources with long-standing bias. Some representatives listened closely. Others narrowed their eyes. A few turned away. Suddenly, a representative from the Valyark species rose to speak. Their voice was sharp and filled with suspicion. They accused humans of hiding their true intentions, claiming Earth was building a secret military empire. Ree calmly requested evidence, but the representative only repeated rumors disguised as facts. Rao noticed a ripple of discomfort move through several Council members. They knew the accusation was weak. Still, no one stepped in to defend Earth. No one challenged the false statements. The silence troubled Rao more than the accusation itself. For the first time since arriving, Rao felt uneasy. Something deeper was happening here, something hidden behind the formal charges and the official tone. It felt as though a decision had already been made long before he stepped into the dome. He kept his voice steady as he continued speaking, refusing to show fear. The people of Earth were listening. They trusted him. He would not falter, but as he glanced around the dome, He could not shake the feeling that a shadow was moving behind the council's words. A shadow that wanted him here not for answers, but for something far more dangerous. His mission had just begun, and already the ground beneath him felt unstable, as if a trap had been set long before he arrived. Rao knew one thing for certain now. This was not a normal hearing. This was something else. Something planned. Something meant to reshape the future of Earth, and he was standing right at the center of it. When the council called Rao back into the dome the next morning, he felt the same heavy atmosphere waiting for him. The large chamber looked peaceful from a distance, but the moment he stepped inside, he sensed the quiet tension again, like a storm waiting behind closed doors. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled their seats. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of curiosity and doubt. Rao walked to the center platform, careful with each step. His mind stayed calm, but he felt a thin thread of uneasiness tightening inside him. He had hoped the second day would begin with a clear explanation, maybe even a fair discussion. Instead, the presiding voice wasted no time and opened the hearing with new accusations. This time the tone felt sharper, less polite, more rehearsed. The voice announced that overnight, new information had surfaced concerning Earth's expansion into resource-rich regions. Rao listened carefully as several representatives repeated claims he had already countered the previous day. Only now, the claims sounded more polished, as if someone had rewritten them while he slept. He raised his hand and asked to speak. The presiding voice allowed it, though reluctantly. Rao calmly explained that Earth had only entered zones that were unclaimed or open for development according to council law. He provided timestamps, documents, communication logs, court rulings from earlier cases, and geological surveys shared with neighboring systems. Everything was by the book. The council murmured among themselves. Some looked convinced. Others looked irritated, as if his clear evidence was an inconvenience rather than a relief. A representative from the Hilorian species leaned forward. Their voice was soft, but carried a strange authority. They asked why humans had increased their defense installations in nearby systems. Rao explained that Earth faced pirate attacks and border raids, and building stronger defenses was necessary for safety. He emphasized that none of the installations threatened any council species. The representative sat down slowly. Saying nothing in response, another representative stood up. This one from a species known for strict discipline and strong military culture. They questioned Earth's new fleet designs, suggesting they were made for long-range conflict rather than defense. Rao again clarified that Earth had upgraded older ships because they were outdated and vulnerable. These new designs were more efficient, safer, and required fewer resources. But the representative did not seem interested in the explanation. They simply nodded and sat down as if they had confirmed what they already believed. Rao could feel it more clearly now. The problem wasn't Earth's actions. The problem was that some members of the council had decided something long before today. Facts did not matter. Evidence did not matter. Their decisions were being guided by fear, suspicion, and perhaps hidden motives he had not yet uncovered. As the questioning continued, Rao noticed a pattern. A small group of representatives, the same ones who had shown irritation or distrust, kept steering the conversation. They would raise their voices, pressure him with harsh questions, and talk over those who tried to speak more calmly. Even when another representative asked a fair question, one from the hostile group would jump in and twist the discussion back toward doubt. It was becoming clear that there were two sides forming in the dome. One that wanted truth, and another that wanted control. Rao answered every question with patience. He did not raise his voice. He did not look frustrated, even when the accusations turned unreasonable. He kept reminding himself that he represented Earth. If he showed anger, they would twist it into confirmation that humans were unstable. Around midday, The presiding voice called for a short break. Representatives rose from their seats and formed small circles across the dome, whispering among themselves. Some looked in Rao's direction. Others deliberately avoided him, as if standing near him might pull them into trouble. Rao stood alone on the platform, watching the movements around him. Every detail mattered. Every whisper. Every glance. He tried to read their intentions, but too much was happening at once. The platform slowly lowered to the floor, allowing him to step aside. A council attendant approached him and quietly asked if he needed rest or water. Rao thanked them but declined. The attendant looked nervous, their hands slightly trembling. It made Rao wonder whether the pressure was affecting even the staff. He walked to a small side window, overlooking the city-like structures of the council. Ships passed through the sky in steady streams, moving in patterns only experienced pilots could understand. Down below, the ground levels buzzed with activity. Markets, transport hubs, and administrative offices filled the landscape like puzzle pieces. It was a world built on order. Yet inside the dome behind him, chaos was forming, carefully hidden, but deeply present. When the break ended, the council members returned to their seats. The presiding voice called the dome to silence, and Rao stepped once again onto the center platform. The air in the chamber felt heavier now. Even the lights seemed dimmer. The voice announced that several council factions had submitted new claims against Earth. Rao expected this, but the nature of the claims surprised him. They accused Earth of developing secret technologies capable of destabilizing planetary systems. They accused Earth of interfering with communication networks. They even accused humans of spying on council operations. Rao took a slow breath before responding. He explained clearly that none of this was true. He asked for evidence. Real evidence, not rumors, not projections, not assumptions. The representatives who had pushed the accusations exchanged glances. One of them stood and displayed a holographic chart that looked impressive but proved nothing. It showed energy signatures that could belong to any species using modern drives. The representative said humans were the most likely source. Rao challenged that assumption. He asked for proof. The representative could not provide any. Still, they tried to continue speaking until the presiding voice asked them to sit. Then a different representative stood, this one from a peaceful aquatic species known for fairness. They defended Earth, stating clearly that humans had cooperated with their species for years and had never shown aggression. Rao felt a small spark of hope, but the hostile group reacted quickly. One of them accused the aquatic species of being manipulated by humans. Another implied they were too trusting to see the danger. The tension rose so sharply that the presiding voice had to strike the sound pillar. Creating a deep tone to silence, the domed out Rao felt a cold realization settling inside him. The hearing was no longer about facts. It was no longer about Earth's actions. It was a struggle for influence. A fight among the council members themselves, using Earth as the tool or the excuse. He continued to defend Earth with patience, presenting logs, reports, and expert statements. The representatives who wanted fairness listened carefully. The others barely pretended. Hours passed like this. Accusation after accusation, many repeating old rumors. Each time Rao countered them with clarity. But each time, the hostile group twisted the narrative again. Near the end of the session, the presiding voice announced that the hearing would continue the next day. Rao expected the platform to lower, but instead, the voice added one more statement. It said that new information had arrived from an unknown source. And this information suggested that Earth had been involved in unauthorized surveillance of council regions. The dome grew silent. Rao asked, once again, for evidence. The presiding voice replied only that the material would be reviewed overnight and presented in the next session. Rao felt the uneasiness in his chest sharpen. Someone was feeding the council false information at the perfect moment. Someone who wanted to push the situation towards something dangerous. Someone who wanted Earth cornered Dot as the session ended and the representatives left. Rao stayed on the platform a moment longer, trying to understand the hidden hands behind everything. He knew a trap when he saw one. He had walked through enough negotiations to recognize when someone was building a case not from truth, but from intention. He looked around the now empty dome. The silence felt almost alive, as if the room itself was waiting for the next move. Ree left quietly, his mind working through every detail. He had come here to prevent conflict, but now he realized he was standing at the center of a plan that someone had laid out carefully across many years. And if he didn't uncover the truth soon, Earth would pay the price for something it had never done. The third morning began with a strange stillness in the air, the kind that made Rao pause before leaving his assigned room. He stood by the small window, looking at the layered sky of the council world. Soft golden light stretched across the horizon, but unlike the previous days, the city outside seemed unusually quiet. Even the flow of ships in the sky looked slower, more controlled, almost like the world was holding its breath. Ryu sensed something was different today. Something heavier. Something prepared. He straightened his uniform and walked toward the corridor where two attendants waited to guide him. They didn't speak on the way to the transport pod, and their silence felt unnatural this time, as if they had been told not to engage with him. When one of them accidentally made eye contact, they immediately looked away, shoulders stiffening. Rao felt the uneasiness sink deeper into him. He had experienced political pressure before, but the atmosphere today felt more like a decision had already been made. A quiet conclusion behind closed doors. And whatever it wasn't going to be in his favor. The transport pod moved faster this time. It didn't follow the usual curved path that allowed him to see the city. Instead, it took a straight route, as if someone wanted the journey to happen quickly, without giving him time to think. When the pod stopped outside the council dome, Rao stepped out and immediately noticed the large crowd gathered on the spectator levels above. Normally, hearings did not attract this many observers. Today was different. Today the seats were full, and even the standing platforms were crowded. Representatives, aides, journalists from different species, even off-duty guards, all had come to watch. The sight of him struck Rao as strange and unsettling. Why would so many come unless they expected something dramatic? Something final? He walked into the dome, and the murmurs of the crowd lowered but did not stop. Their eyes followed him as he stepped onto the central platform. He saw curiosity, tension, and even fear in some faces. He also saw something else: anticipation, as if they were waiting for a verdict they already believed. The platform rose slowly, bringing him into full view. The lights glowed brighter, making the entire chamber feel colder. The presiding voice echoed across the dome, announcing the beginning of the session. It spoke with a tone that felt more formal and distant than on previous days. The voice began by stating that new evidence had been reviewed. Overnight. Rao kept his face calm, though his heart tightened. A representative from the hostile group stood and displayed a holographic projection. It showed a series of unreadable symbols and distorted images, none clearly connected to Earth, yet the representative announced confidently that these patterns suggested Earth had been involved in secret intelligence operations near protected council sites. Rao stepped forward. He asked calmly where the data came from. The representative replied that the source was classified. Rao asked how the data had been verified. The representative said verification was in progress. He asked why unverified data was being used as evidence. The representative ignored the question. The presiding voice told Rao to remain silent until the representative finished. Speaking. Rao felt the shift clearly now. The rules were changing. Fairness was dissolving. But he kept his posture straight. Losing composure would give them exactly what they wanted. The representative continued, presenting more unclear data flashing lines, numbers, and images that made no logical sense. The crowd whispered among themselves, not because they understood, but because the atmosphere pushed them toward belief. The representative finished. The presiding voice finally allowed Rao to speak. Rao took a calm breath and explained that none of the images connected to Earth or human activity. He reminded them that accusing an entire planet required verified proof, not blurry symbols from an unnamed source. He urged them to consider the consequences of acting on false information. Some members looked thoughtful. Others acted as if they had heard nothing at all. A different representative from the hostile group stood. Their posture was rigid, like they had rehearsed every word. They claimed that Earth had interfered with council matters before, even though no official record had ever shown such behavior. They accused Earth of having long-term plans to challenge the council's authority. Rao asked once again for evidence. The representative said the proof existed, but could not be shown publicly. The room murmured with uncertainty. Rao spoke with firm respect. He said that hidden evidence, secret sources, and withheld records could not be the basis of any lawful decision. He warned that this path would harm not only Earth, but the Council's own credibility. Several representatives exchanged uneasy looks, but then the Valyark representative stood, the same one who had pushed the harshest accusations on the first day. They spread their thin arms dramatically, as if they were addressing a crowd in a theater rather than a court. They declared that Earth had become a threat to galactic stability. They accused Rao personally of manipulating the Council with clever words and false politeness. They claimed humans were moving too fast, growing too strong, and refusing to slow down. Rao didn't respond immediately. He simply watched the representative speak, their voice rising, their words twisting emotional fear into political argument. They weren't presenting facts. They were building a story, a dangerous one. When they finally stopped, the dome fell silent. The presiding voice asked if the council was ready to vote on the charges. Rao felt the world stop for a moment. Vote? On what? No official evidence had been accepted. No fair hearing had taken place. The council had jumped past every step of a lawful investigation. Rio raised his hand. The presiding voice hesitated, then allowed him to speak. He spoke slowly, choosing every word carefully. Because he understood the moment had shifted from negotiation to something far more serious. He told them that Earth had come in peace. That Earth respected every rule written by the Council. That he had provided every document, every record, every proof asked of him. And then he asked a question that cut through the dome like cold air. Why have none of my answers been recorded in the session logs? The dome stirred. Several representatives looked confused. Some checked their table screens. Others frowned. The presiding voice asked what he meant. Ryu continued, explaining that the session logs displayed next to each representative should show his submitted documents and statements. But they were missing. Entire sections of the digital record had been erased or replaced. Whispers erupted across the room. The presiding voice demanded silence. Rao looked around slowly, letting the weight of his words settle. Someone had been altering the records. Someone had been hiding every defense he had given. A representative from one of the neutral species stood, clearly disturbed. They confirmed on their device that large parts of the logs were missing. A member from a nearby system did the same. Others checked their screens and murmured in alarm. But before the dome could fall into complete disorder, the hostile group acted fast. The Valyark representative shouted that the missing records were obviously a trick by humans to delay the vote. The hostile representatives backed them instantly. They spoke loudly, drowning out the confusion of the others. They claimed Earth had hacked the Council's systems to erase the logs. They declared that this act alone proved guilt beyond doubt. The presiding voice demanded order again, but the dome had become a storm of mixed voices. Some demanded investigation. Some insisted on pausing the session. But the hostile group kept pushing, louder and faster, forcing the momentum their way. Then, in a sudden and unsettling move, the presiding voice asked for silence and announced that an emergency vote would take place. Immediately, Rao stood completely still. He felt a chill, not from fear, but from understanding. Someone had set this up from the beginning. The missing logs were not an accident. The sudden vote was not a mistake. He watched as lights across the dome flashed green for confirmation, red for rejection. Many representatives hesitated. Some looked torn. But the hostile group pressed forward with full force, influencing every undecided member around them. The vote completed within moments. The presiding voice announced the result. The council had found Rao guilty. The punishment: termination of his envoy status, and immediate execution as a protective measure for the galaxy. The dome erupted into noise shock, disbelief, and a few unsettling cheers from the hostile group. Rao didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply breathed slowly and told himself to stay calm. He had already understood long ago that this hearing wasn't about truth. It was about power. Guards approached him, not with cruelty, but with formal duty. They surrounded him and placed restraints on his wrists. The restraints were symbolic, not painful. They were meant to show control, not cause harm. As they led him away, he looked once more at the crowd. Most watched in stunned silence. Some looked away, ashamed. A few looked satisfied. Rao held his head high. He had come in peace. He had spoken truth. Whatever happened next, the fault would not lie with Earth. But as the guards took him down the long corridor, something else stirred inside him. The council had not executed an envoy in centuries. This decision would ignite consequences no one in that dome had truly imagined. Not for him, but for the entire galaxy. The news of Rao's execution reached Earth almost immediately. The moment the broadcast flickered onto the screens across the planet, silence fell. Streets that had been bustling with morning activity froze. Offices, schools, and homes paused as people watched the event replayed in real time. For a moment, it was impossible to believe. How could the Galaxy Council, an organization that claimed to maintain fairness, execute a human envoy in cold formality without any warning? Government offices went into emergency mode. Leaders of Earth's Unified Defense Directorate convened in secure chambers. The room buzzed with voices, some calm, some shaking with barely controlled anger. Maps, holographic displays, and data streams filled every surface, tracking the movement of fleets, colonies, and council communication nodes. The lead director, a person known for meticulous judgment, spoke first. This is not an accident. This is deliberate. The council has overstepped every legal, ethical, and diplomatic boundary known to humanity. Rao was not just an envoy. He represented every human being alive and every human life that will come after us. The room fell silent for a brief moment, the weight of the statement pressing on everyone. Then another officer asked the question that hung in the air for everyone, heavy and sharp. What do we do next? It was not a question for discussion. It was a question for action. Earth's leadership had always prepared for contingencies. Plans kept secret and locked away for decades, meant only for the most extreme circumstances. For centuries, humanity had focused on survival, knowing that if ever a threat became existential, they could respond in kind. The protocol they now considered activating had a single, chilling name: the Annihilation Protocol. Despite its name, the protocol was not a tool of vengeance. It was a calculated, carefully measured response to ensure the survival of Earth and the human race in the face of an overwhelming threat. The protocol allowed Earth to deploy advanced fleets, autonomous defenses, and targeted systems capable of disabling enemy strongholds before they could retaliate. It was a last resort measure, and humanity had never used it. Until now, the decision was made quickly but carefully. Messages were sent to the leaders of all human colonies. Orders were transmitted to fleet commanders scattered across the galaxy. Every move was coordinated, precise, and deliberate. Humanity would respond, but it would respond with strategy, not chaos. In the command center, the first fleets prepared for deployment. Engineers and pilots worked around the clock, loading ships with advanced systems designed not for full-scale destruction, but to disable and contain. The ships hummed with controlled energy, their sensors mapping routes through star systems, calculating distances, velocities, and potential hazards. Every action had a purpose. Every target had been selected with meticulous care. Meanwhile, diplomats and analysts worked feverishly, reviewing every piece of information from Council worlds, attempting to identify allies and neutrals who might help prevent a wider conflict. Humanity understood that even as they moved to defend themselves, the galaxy watched. If the Annihilation Protocol were misinterpreted, it could spark a war that no one could control. Still, there was no hesitation. Rao had been executed. Earth had been humiliated in front of countless species. The planet itself demanded action, and humanity responded with precision. Across the planet, citizens followed every update. Some protested, calling for diplomacy, while others cheered the decisive stance of the leadership. Fear mixed with pride. The anger over Rao's death ignited a new sense of unity. Humans everywhere understood that what had been intended as punishment for one man could have ended the hope for the entire species. High above Earth, the command fleet assembled in orbit. Ships of all sizes moved in coordinated formations. Their hulls reflected the sunlight, creating a silver constellation around the planet. The fleet's commanders, some human and some artificial intelligence designed for decision support, ran final checks. The automated systems monitored Council communications, scanning for any response. Then the first signals were sent. Messages went directly to key Council members, demanding an explanation, demanding accountability, and demanding reparations. The messages were firm but precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Humanity did not want unnecessary war. Humanity did not want chaos. Humanity wanted justice, and they would have it, whether the Council agreed or not. Across Council space, the news of the Annihilation Protocol being activated spread quickly. Some species panicked. They had underestimated humans, assuming that Earth's diplomacy and relative technological development meant restraint. They now realized they had misjudged a species capable of patience, calculation, and lethal precision. Even the neutral species who had observed the initial conflict began reconsidering their positions. Some sent emissaries to Earth, requesting reassurances and clarifications. Others quietly began moving their fleets and assets away from key conflict zones, trying to avoid being caught in the escalation. Back on Earth, leaders monitored every reaction carefully. Human strategists anticipated several responses from the Council and its allies, each more dangerous than the last. Yet humanity remained steady. Every action taken by the fleet was measured. Every potential strike had an alternative plan. Earth did not seek vengeance for the sake of anger. It sought to secure the safety of its people. That, in the midst of this tension, a small team of intelligence analysts discovered something unsettling. Evidence suggested that Roe's execution was not the decision of the entire Council, but of a small faction working in secret. This faction had long feared humanity's rise and manipulated events to provoke a crisis. The revelation shocked Earth's leaders. It meant that the Council's public authority had been misused, and that the conflict could potentially be resolved if the right channels were reached. But even knowing this, the Annihilation Protocol could not be deactivated immediately. Humanity had already mobilized. Retreating without a clear acknowledgement of responsibility would have shown weakness, and Rao's death demanded respect. Across the human colonies, communications were filled with urgency and discipline. Colonists were instructed to maintain calm, follow the fleet's guidance, and prepare for potential conflict zones. Scientists and engineers continued to enhance defensive technologies, ensuring that humanity could respond effectively to any escalation. Even as plans unfolded, humanity did not act recklessly. Ships patrolled sensitive areas, scanning for Council reconnaissance units. Diplomats sent repeated messages, emphasizing peace if the hostile faction could be neutralized. Every action was a careful balance between power and restraint, demonstrating humanity's capacity for strategic thinking under pressure. As the first fleets moved out, a profound sense of purpose filled the command centers. Every human involved understood the gravity of the moment. Rao had given his life for the species. Every ship, every officer, every operator felt the responsibility of ensuring that sacrifice had meaning. For the citizens of Earth, the knowledge that their leaders had prepared for this moment, that every action was calculated and controlled, brought a mix of fear and pride. They realized humanity had reached a level of coordination and determination that even the most powerful factions in the galaxy could not ignore. And somewhere, in the quiet chambers of the Council, whispers began to circulate. The execution of a human envoy had triggered a chain reaction no one had expected. The galaxy's balance, carefully maintained for centuries, was shifting under the weight of one decision. The faction that had orchestrated Rao's death realized too late that they had underestimated a species capable of patience, intelligence, and decisive action. As night fell on Earth, cities glowed softly under a calm sky, unaware to most of the silent fleets moving in precise formation above. Humanity had chosen a path neither reckless nor vindictive, but firm and deliberate. The Annihilation Protocol was no longer just a plan on paper. It was the tangible expression of humanity's resolve to protect itself and honor the envoy who had stood for peace in the face of betrayal. Rao's sacrifice, though tragic, had ignited a new era for humanity, one in which they would no longer be underestimated, one in which the value of careful planning, measured response, and unyielding courage had been proven beyond doubt. And yet, even with fleets mobilized, messages sent, and strategies enacted, Earth's leaders knew the situation was far from over. The Council still existed, still held power, and still had allies capable of dangerous moves. Humanity was prepared, but the coming days would test not only their strength, but their wisdom, restraint, and ability to navigate the most treacherous political landscape in the galaxy. Through it all, Rao's image remained in the minds of every leader and every citizen involved. His calm determination, his courage under scrutiny, and his unwavering belief in humanity's right to fairness became the guiding force for every decision. His life had been taken, but his mission continued through the actions of the species he had represented so fully. And as Earth moved with quiet precision across the stars, a single, undeniable truth settled in the minds of every human. They would no longer wait for threats to come to them. They would act decisively and carefully to ensure their survival and the safety of their people. Rao had shown the path, and humanity was now walking it, with resolve stronger than ever before. The fleets moved through space with quiet determination, their engines humming a steady rhythm that filled the bridge of every ship. Each vessel carried thousands of sensors, defensive systems, and autonomous units ready to respond to any threat. The human commanders had planned every possible scenario, from sudden attacks to hidden ambushes. Each move was calculated to protect their people, their colonies, and their planet. On the bridge of one of the largest command ships, officers monitored star lanes, tracking council patrols and communication channels. The mood was tense but controlled. There was no panic, no fear-driven decisions. The human crew understood that their actions would define the future of their species. Every calculation, every maneuver mattered. Doc reports arrived from various sectors. Some council fleets had started repositioning. Some neutral species, fearing the escalation, withdrew their assets from critical areas. Communication attempts were made, but many factions remained silent. Uncertain of what humans would do next. The first strike units moved in near council outposts that had previously monitored human expansion. They did not fire immediately. Instead, they deployed signal jammers and systems designed to disable surveillance and communication. The goal was simple: prevent the council from coordinating an immediate counterattack while avoiding unnecessary casualties. Even in this calculated advance, the human commanders maintained contact with Earth. Each move was carefully transmitted, reviewed, and confirmed. No one acted rashly. The priority was to protect life, maintain control, and demonstrate that humanity could act decisively without descending into chaos. Back on Earth, the population followed every report. Screens across cities displayed live updates of fleet positions, communications, and strategic movements. People felt the tension of history pressing down on them, yet there was pride in the careful execution of a plan they had never imagined would be necessary. Rao's name came up often in discussions, not just as a symbol of loss, but as a symbol of why humanity had to act with intelligence, not vengeance. The first confrontation came in a region of space where council supply routes crossed densely populated trade lanes. A council convoy approached, unaware of the human ships tracking them. Without opening fire, the human fleet activated a series of electromagnetic pulses that disabled the convoy's propulsion and communication systems. The ships were not destroyed. They simply became temporarily inoperable, forced to drift harmlessly in space. The council ships scrambled to regain control, but their systems remained down long enough for the human fleet to establish a secure perimeter. When communication was finally restored, the human commanders sent clear messages. This is not an act of aggression. We seek to prevent escalation and ensure safety. Any attack on humanity will be met with full defensive measures. Some council officers panicked at the demonstration of precision and control. Others began to question the orders they had received from the faction that had orchestrated Ria's execution. The initial shock had shaken even long-standing political alliances within the council. Meanwhile, smaller human units moved to disrupt key supply networks used by the hostile faction. These operations were surgical, designed to minimize risk while sending a clear message. Humanity was no longer a passive observer in galactic politics. They were a force to be acknowledged and respected. As days passed, the human fleet expanded its presence, creating a network of controlled zones where council ships could no longer operate freely. Neutral species began opening channels for dialogue, realizing that humans could act with precision, speed, and restraint. The display of strategic power without unnecessary destruction shifted perceptions across the galaxy. Despite the outward calm, human commanders remained vigilant. Intelligence units worked tirelessly, intercepting council communications, tracking fleet movements, and monitoring political shifts. Every decision was reviewed multiple times. Every action had backup contingencies. There was no room for mistakes. On one command ship, a young officer observed the galaxy through a panoramic window. The stars stretched infinitely, but now they looked different. Each point of light represented a system at risk, a potential ally, or a potential adversary. The scale of responsibility was overwhelming, yet the officer understood the importance of humanity's presence. They were no longer just inhabitants of one planet. They were a species navigating a complex, dangerous galaxy with courage and intelligence. Back in the council chambers, the faction that had pushed for Rao's execution was losing control. Their carefully constructed narrative was crumbling under the reality of human precision and coordination. Panic spread through their ranks as they realized they had underestimated the consequences of their actions. Some representatives attempted to call for emergency votes to reverse decisions. But the momentum had shifted. Neutral and allied species began demanding fairness, questioning the methods that led to Rao's death, and insisting that humanity be heard. The Council's authority was under pressure from both internal and external forces. Meanwhile, human diplomatic teams reached out quietly to sympathetic factions within the Council. They offered evidence of Rao's innocence, proof of manipulated data, and documentation of the actions taken by the hostile faction. Slowly, cracks appeared in the Council's united front. Some members openly expressed regret for the manipulation they had unknowingly supported. As fleets held strategic positions across multiple star lanes, Earth prepared for the next phase. Advanced surveillance units monitored potential Council responses. Defensive systems were upgraded daily. Communications continued to flow between colonies and the home planet. Humanity moved with coordinated efficiency, demonstrating that they could act decisively while maintaining order, ethics, and restraint. The first direct encounter with hostile Council forces came near a densely populated star cluster. Human units encountered a squadron sent to challenge their presence. Rao's mission and sacrifice had taught them that confrontation could not be avoided entirely. But they would control the battle, not be controlled by it. Human ships deployed defensive shields and tactical maneuvers, disabling Council weapons without destroying ships or harming crews. Each move was calculated, proving that humanity could defend itself with efficiency and intelligence. The Council forces, unprepared for this type of controlled response, were forced to retreat, leaving behind a path of disrupted systems and a clear message. Humans would not be underestimated again. Across the galaxy, other species observed these engagements. Some were inspired. Some were fearful. Humanity's actions sent a clear signal. They were capable, disciplined, and united. The myth of humans as a new, inexperienced species had ended. Rao's death had ignited a transformation that no one could ignore. Back on Earth, citizens followed each report closely. Families gathered in living rooms, listening to updates from fleets operating thousands of light years away. Students discussed the strategic precision in classrooms. Scientists analyzed movements of ships in simulation exercises. Rao's sacrifice had created a unifying moment for humanity, reinforcing determination and awareness across every sector of society. Even as humanity advanced, the leadership maintained open channels for communication. Messages were sent to the Council, offering a path toward resolution if the hostile faction could be held accountable. Humans made it clear they did not seek total destruction, only fairness, justice, and protection for their species. And while the fleets continued to expand their control over critical regions, intelligence teams discovered more details about the faction behind Rao's execution. Their network of manipulation extended further than anyone had realized, infiltrating communications, data records, and political alliances. It became clear that the resolution of this crisis would not come from brute force alone. Strategic negotiation would be necessary to neutralize the faction without triggering broader conflict. As human ships moved steadily through Council space, one thing became certain: the galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. Humanity had proven its resolve, its capability, and its wisdom. Rao's life had been taken, but his mission, The mission of protection, justice, and intelligent action lived on in every ship, every officer, and every citizen who understood the stakes. Humanity had entered the next phase of galactic presence. They had faced the Council's hostility, responded with precision, and demonstrated the kind of strength that comes not from fear or anger, but from calculated courage. And as the fleets held their positions, ready to respond to any challenge, the galaxy began to recognize a simple truth. The humans would no longer be underestimated, ignored, or manipulated. The battle lines were clear. The Council's faction responsible for Rao's death had lost the element of surprise, the credibility, and the control they once held. Humanity had reshaped the balance of power not through chaos, but through disciplined, intelligent action. And somewhere, deep within the command centers, human leaders reflected quietly. This was only the beginning. The next steps would determine not only the future of the species, but the future of the entire galaxy. Every move had to be measured. Every choice had to be precise. The fate of countless worlds now rested in the hands of a species that had finally shown what it could do when pushed to its limits. Rio's legacy had become a living force. The hum. The fleets held steady in the edge of Council space, each ship a silent sentinel ready to respond to the slightest move. The galaxy seemed to pause, waiting for the next moment of action. Every human officer, every crew member, and every command center understood the stakes. The moment had arrived to finish what Rao had begun: to secure justice, protect their species, and prove that humanity would no longer be dismissed or underestimated. Earth sent a clear message to the Council. It was firm, precise, and undeniable. Humanity sought the faction responsible for Rao's death. They demanded accountability, an official retraction of false accusations, and assurance that no other human envoy would ever be threatened again. A message was delivered simultaneously through every communication channel, reaching every species observing the situation. In the Council chambers, tension had reached its peak. The faction responsible for orchestrating Rao's execution realized that they had underestimated humanity's determination, planning, and precision. Their attempts to control the narrative had failed. Neutral species were speaking openly in favor of humans, questioning the actions that led to the envoy's death. Allies of the faction were beginning to doubt the wisdom of continuing the confrontation. Human intelligence analysts had traced the faction's influence across Council networks, identifying hidden communications, altered session logs, and secret orders. They discovered evidence that linked the faction to decades of misinformation campaigns against Earth, all designed to provoke fear and distrust. With this knowledge, humanity had two choices: continue the military pressure or combine it with diplomacy to isolate the faction completely. The decision was clear. Humanity moved with a coordinated approach, maintaining fleet positions to prevent any immediate attacks, while sending carefully prepared envoys and messages to neutral and supportive Council members. Their strategy was simple but powerful: show strength without unnecessary aggression, and create pressure for the faction to surrender or reveal the truth. Across multiple star systems, human fleets deployed advanced sensor arrays and communications intercept units. Every movement of Council ships was monitored in real time. Commanders simulated potential scenarios and calculated responses before the enemy could even consider a move. Human ships moved like shadows, precise, coordinated, and ready. The first breakthrough came from a neutral faction, one that had previously observed the events from a distance. They contacted Earth directly, offering to share proof of the manipulations carried out by the hostile Council faction. The evidence confirmed every suspicion humans had: falsified logs, fabricated surveillance reports, and secret orders to provoke conflict. Human leaders addressed the entire Council. They presented the evidence openly, showing the truth to every member present. The hostile faction tried to deny it, but the documents, recordings, and intercepted communications left no room for doubt. The Council could see the deception clearly. The shift was immediate. Members who had hesitated, who had supported the faction out of fear or ignorance, began questioning their position. The presiding authority, now confronted with undeniable evidence, demanded explanations. The faction could no longer hide behind secrecy. For the first time since Rao's execution, human representatives were allowed to speak directly within the council chambers. Their words were calm, measured, and powerful. They reminded the Council of humanity's history, its commitment to peace, and the ultimate sacrifice of their envoy. They explained the danger of allowing deception to dictate decisions and the risk of eyes losing credibility for centuries of diplomacy. Silence followed. The chamber, once filled with tension and accusations, now hung on every word. The presence of human fleets in council space was a silent reminder of capability, discipline, and determination. It was clear that humanity would defend itself and its interests. Rao's death had sparked action, but the species' response demonstrated wisdom and restraint, not mindless revenge. The hostile faction tried to regain control, but the tide had shifted. Neutral and allied members demanded accountability. Evidence could not be ignored. Under immense pressure, the faction's leaders were forced to admit their actions. They explained, without justification, that they had sought to contain what they perceived as a growing human threat. Their plan had backfired, exposing their manipulation and undermining their credibility. The Council voted, not to destroy humanity, not to punish Earth further, but to remove the hostile faction from power, impose restrictions on their influence, and formally acknowledge the injustice done to Rao and the humans. The decision was historic. Humanity had entered council space not as a threat, but as a disciplined, respected presence, capable of enforcing fairness and accountability. Across Earth and its colonies, celebrations were quiet but meaningful. People recognized the gravity of what had happened. Humanity had faced an existential threat and responded with intelligence, patience, and strength. Rao's sacrifice had not been in vain. His death had been a catalyst, and the species' unity and discipline had transformed it into a victory that honored his mission. The fleet slowly returned to strategic positions, maintaining readiness but withdrawing from immediate confrontation. Diplomats continued discussions with council members, ensuring that the newly established agreements would be enforced and that the faction responsible could no longer manipulate decisions in secret. Back on Earth, schools, offices, and homes buzzed with cautious optimism. Citizens discussed the events with awe and pride. Rao's name was remembered not only for his courage, but as a symbol of humanity's ability to face manipulation, danger, and injustice without losing focus or integrity. The planet itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its people united under the lessons of sacrifice, strategy, and resilience. In the months that followed, humanity strengthened its position further. Advanced fleets continued to patrol key regions. Diplomats solidified new alliances with species that had observed the crisis. Communication protocols were adjusted, and safeguards implemented to ensure that no faction could manipulate the truth again. Humanity had proven itself. The galaxy had witnessed the power of intelligence, discipline, and courage combined. They had faced a council that sought to control through fear, and they had responded not with rash aggression, but with precision, strategy, and unity. For generations to come, Rao's story would be told as the moment when humanity stepped fully into the wider galaxy, not as newcomers, but as a species capable of responsibility, justice, and decisive action. He had gone in as a single envoy representing one planet, and through the tragedy of his death, humanity had risen as a united force, respected across countless star systems. Even as peace returned, human leaders remained vigilant. They knew that the galaxy was vast, full of potential threats and opportunities alike. Humanity had proven its ability to respond decisively, but they also understood that true security came from constant awareness, preparation, and careful strategy. Rao's mission, in many ways, had just begun not in life, but in the enduring influence of the courage and principles he had embodied. And so, with fleets in orbit, colonies secure, and the Council now aware of humanity's capability and resolve, the species looked to the future with determination. The events that began with fear and betrayal had ended with clarity and justice. Rao's legacy had become a foundation for humanity's place in the galaxy, a reminder that courage, patience, and careful action could overcome even the most dangerous of manipulations. The story of Earth and Rao's mission would be remembered across systems, not for the loss, but for the triumph of strategy, discipline, and integrity. Humanity had faced deception, pressure, and the threat of annihilation, and emerged stronger, wiser, and fully recognized as a force to be counted among the stars. And somewhere, across the countless points of light in the galaxy, humans knew one truth above all: Rao had not died in vain, and humanity's future was now firmly in their own hands. Every decision, every strategy, every step forward would carry the lessons of his courage and the discipline of their species. The galaxy had learned the lesson as well. Humanity was no longer a passive observer. Humanity had arrived,